I know what you're thinking. The biggest curse in Genshin is the fact that good-ass lore is hidden in artifact sets, miscellaneous interactables, and NPC dialogue that we can never retrigger again. Okay, maybe that's not it, but as a lore content creator, it might be part of it. I know you probably feel that version 4.5 is a dry patch, but I need to tell you how insane the lore drops were. My brain literally opened up, and I think I just found the truth behind one of Genshin's biggest secrets, the Curse of Death. With the release of version 4.5, you can now purchase volumes 1 and 2 of Perinheri in the Fontaine bookstore, and it's a brand new book series that contains a lot of shocking information about Khaenri'ah. It reveals the truth behind Teyvat's worldwide curse, and apparently Zhongli is involved. But to be honest, when is Zhongli ever not involved? Because of the new details of this Hilichurl epidemic we're familiar with, I was able to discover an even scarier curse that's happening at the same time. Today's video will be a deep dive into Perinheri, the Khaenri'ah secrets that were revealed in it, and its massive significance to Genshin's overall lore, including the Hilichurl Curse that horribly plagues Teyvat even today. Then we'll discuss Genshin's deadliest curse. I'm your Leafy Lore Shearer Minsleif, and I read the Genshin Impact lore so that you don't have to. Since we'll be discussing new information which I'm sure is gonna have even more incredible literary payoff in Genshin's future arc conquests, I have some good news to share with you. Today's video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. Raid just added a ton of new features, and if you've been playing Raid since 2021, you actually might not recognize the game today. Live Arena is a brand new 4v4 PvP mode complete with character picks and bans. Curse City is a massive new feature with 100 stages to complete, and clearing its stages will earn you valuable rewards like a free mythical champion. New champions and brand new mythical champions which can use metamorph skills to transform between two forms, bringing high levels of power. All of these features were released just 6 months ago. But that's not all. Raid Shadow Legends is celebrating its 5-year anniversary with the Festival of Creation, and the rewards they're giving you are insane. The Festival of Creation is a month-long party with events, tournaments, summon boosts, free gifts, and so much more. Use my link in the description or scan my QR code to download Raid today and get bonuses that are worth up to $100. Including Epic Champion Lady Atessa, 500,000 silver, and many more right from the start. After reaching level 25, you'll get additional 500,000 silver, epic skill tomes, potions, and more. And after using my download link or QR code, use this festive promo code FESTIVAL5 to 500,000 silver and another epic champion Teyrell, as well as endless amounts of other rewards. Raid Shadow Legends is constantly adding new features, so commemorate this momentous anniversary with me and search up Minsleif. Join my clan, Keepers of Khaenri'ah, and let's be legends together. Thanks so much Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring today's video. Let's go over the new information we learned about Khaenri'ah from Perinheri. Keep in mind, Perinheri might not be 100% accurate. I know I hyped you up for it, and you should still be hyped. I just thought for lore and theory crafting purposes, I should disclose that. The author of the first edition of Perinheri claims to have based his tale on a legendary story known throughout Khaenri'ah, and conveniently, there are none left who can verify this. Perinheri is the collaborative effort from various authors and contributors over several generations, and some of these names might be familiar to you. This means it's very likely for things to have been misinterpreted, misremembered, or even rewritten for the purpose of entertainment over time. Until things get confirmed or deconfirmed by our alive Khaenri'ahns, then we still have some reason to believe that Perinheri is reliable. And that's because of the Irminsul tree. If you've gotten to the Sumeru Archon quest, this should be familiar to you, but as a recap, the Irminsul tree is essentially a database of all the memories and events that have ever happened in Teyvat. The Irminsul can be tampered with, and Teyvat's memories and events can be altered drastically. To prevent that, Teyvatians have recorded historical events in the form of allegories or fairy tales. I think Perinheri might be an example of Teyvatians preserving history in the form of fairy tales. And if that's the case, I don't want to rule out the possibility that a decent amount of it was passed on carefully from author to author across several generations. There's also several things in canon lore that corroborate the evidence we do find in Perinheri, and again, it's the clearest explanation for one of Genshin's biggest problems, its fatal curse. Before we get to the crazy lore bits, let's start with the new information we learn about Khaenri'ah. Khaenri'ah had at least 2 dynasties. Previously, we only knew of one, the Eclipse Dynasty. But now we have information on the era that preceded the one we're more familiar with, and that's the Crimson Moon Dynasty. The Crimson Moon Dynasty ruled over Khaenri'ah during the Archon War. The Archon War ended 2,000 years ago, and we're not actually sure when it began. All we know is that 600 years before the war ended 2,000 years ago, Barbatos would be declared the Anemo champion and Archon. According to the archaeological records discovered by the Netzisenkreuz Ordo, alchemy and the Beastmaster Knights enjoyed the peak of their influence during this time. The dark sprites mentioned in Perinheri's legend refer to the first version of Black Wolf war beast created via alchemy, the Rift Wolves. From this information and the note references at the end of Perinheri, the art of Khaenri'ah was developed and explored during the Crimson Moon Dynasty. Khaenri'ah is the form of alchemy that focuses on the creation of life. Only those who have reached the peak of learning and alchemical skill could create synthetic life. The only one known to achieve this is Reindotir, Gold, Albedo's master and creator. Another piece of evidence towards this is the mention of the Universitas Magistrorum, a scholarly organization whose area of expertise seemed to be alchemy. It was previously mentioned in a fontaine log by Jacob Ingold, a fontaine researcher who researched Khaenri'ah and alchemy. Reindotir was allegedly the creator of the Rift Wolves, so it means she was probably around the time of this dynasty and the Eclipse Dynasty because we know she was largely blamed for the cataclysm. The Eclipse Dynasty came after the Crimson Moon Dynasty, and we don't actually know how much time each dynasty reigned. What we can get out of this is that Reindotir is pretty old. There's a hint at the beginning of the text. This is a story from very ancient times indeed. In those days, a crimson moon shone down upon the subterranean realm and not the dark sun of latter days. Which could mean that Perinheri was written during or after the Eclipse Dynasty and long after the Crimson Moon Dynasty. So yeah, Albedo's mom is old. These are just assumptions we can make about Reindotir. But there is a name in this text that should be familiar to you. Alberic. A member of the Alberic clan was listed as the commander of half the knights during the Crimson Moon Dynasty. This Alberic clan member was considered one of the strongest warriors in Khaenri'ah at that time. So Kaya's family clan existed as long ago as the Crimson Moon Dynasty into the next dynasty and obviously up to today. Speaking of the next dynasty, the Eclipse Dynasty. At some point, the Eclipse Dynasty replaced the Crimson Moon Dynasty, likely during the Archon War. This dynasty was infamously involved in the Cataclysm and should contain a handful of your faves. According to the reference notes at the bottom of Perinheri, while the Crimson Moon Dynasty focused on alchemy, the Eclipse Dynasty focused on mechanical engineering. This means the ruined machines you see were likely produced during the Eclipse Dynasty. But why did they need all these war machines? Perinheri states that due to the kingdom's unique position, things from outside this world were always leaking into it. The kingdom's weapons would wipe out the calamities slipping in. Khaenri'ah is an underground civilization, and we learned this from Albedo's character story and Kaya's line from the Caribou Archon quest. But if Khaenri'ah is underground, how are things from outside this world always leaking into it? Perinheri states that Khaenri'ans were informed of sea people who believed that the gods came from the oceans. Each time these sea people discovered a shipwrecked person, they would treat them with the utmost honor, for they believed that the gods would take the form of the shipwreck to investigate the mortal realm. According to an author's note, no oceans in the traditional sense existed in Khaenri'ah since it was underground. Only people who were allowed to leave Khaenri'ah for official duties and returned could relay what they saw in the world of Teyvat. The majestic silhouettes of the mountains blur under the sun's searing glare, and the rippling reflections of the moonlight falling upon the sea's surface like a scattering of pearls. The authors clarify that the ocean and sea were often used as a metaphor for the space projected by the stars. So basically, Khaenri'ah needed these war machines to fight against calamities that tried to leak into their world from space. But there's an even more important question you should be asking. If Khaenri'ah is an underground nation, how does it have a sky? The explanation is the famous fake sky theory, a thought originally propagated by Scaramouche during the Unreconciled Stars event where he says,
"The stars, the sky, it's all a gigantic hoax, a lie."
And this was information he himself learned from Piero, a Khaenri'an man who we now know works under the Tsaritsa for the Fatui. I'll try to briefly summarize the fake sky theory for you. Teyvat might look like a firmament since it's referenced in several places in the game, a flat earth with a dome over it. The Amethyst Crown mentions invaders descending from beyond the firmament, bringing destruction, overturning rivers, spreading plagues. The Chaos Oculus says that in the ancient past, these ruins were once part of a civilization mighty enough to almost touch the dome of the firmament. In biblical cosmology, the firmament is the vast solid dome created by God during the Genesis creation narrative to divide the primal sea into upper and lower portions so that the dry land could appear. This means the sky of Teyvat is actually a dome, and the sky we see is just a projection of perhaps what Celestia wants us to see. This theory is often paired with a sister theory, either the real sky is in Khaenri'ah or it's in the Abyss. It's even more mysterious in Chinese. The Abyss is also known as the Void Realm according to the lore in Enkanomiya. The Chinese name for the Void Realm includes the character for empty space or sky. This is a visual representation of what I think is the easiest way to show this theory in action. We segued a little bit, so to recap, this is a Perinheri video. The ocean mentioned in Perinheri is a metaphor for what might be the real sky in Khaenri'ah. And calamities from space were leaking into Khaenri'ah, thus Khaenri'ah had to make war machines to combat the space invaders. I felt that explaining the fake sky theory was the best way for this piece of text in Perinheri to make sense with the laws of Teyvat. So, Khaenri'ah had two dynasties that we know of so far, the Crimson Moon Dynasty and the Eclipse Dynasty, and both are referenced to, obviously, eclipses. The word eclipse comes from the Greek word meaning abandonment, and in ancient Greece, an eclipse was considered an omen of the god's anger and abandonment of the earth. The Crimson Moon is likely a reference to a lunar eclipse. Lunar eclipses occur during a full moon. When the earth is positioned precisely between the moon and sun, the earth casts a shadow on the moon, causing the moon to appear red in color, hence Crimson Moon. The Chinese version of Genshin accurately has the Eclipse Dynasty listed as the Black Sun Dynasty. According to NASA, a solar eclipse looks like an eye with the central pupil created by the bright sun covered by a dark moon. But Perinheri did indeed see an illusion. The crimson moon, hanging high in the pitch-dark night sky, suddenly turned around, revealing itself to be a titanic, horrified eye. This might be a reference to the Hilichurl of corruption from Honkai Impact, which appears as a crimson eye. Although I do play Honkai Star Rail and make videos on it, I'm not too familiar with Honkai Impact lore, unfortunately, but feel free to tackle this observation. Now that we've covered some of the historical lore of Khaenri'ah, what exactly is Perinheri even about? Even though I'm your Leafy Lore Shearer Minsleif and I read the Genshin Impact lore so that you don't have to, I still highly encourage you to read books and texts in Genshin, especially this one if you have time. But if not, I'll summarize it for you since I'd love to anyways. During the Crimson Moon Dynasty, Khaenri'ah had become aware of the existence of Descenders around the time of the Archon War at least 2,000 years ago. In anticipation of the arrival of these Descenders, Khaenri'ah built an orphanage to take care of them. Later on, the orphans of the kingdom and those who wandered in from the outside were accepted as well. This might also include people who came from Teyvat and stayed in Khaenri'ah. Perinheri seems to be a child who is told by the adults to crawl through a tight chimney corridor. At the end of the chimney corridor, they'd ask him, "Are you dead?" The adults refused to accept any of his answers or pleas to leave the corridor until he answered, "Yes, I'm dead." The adults asked him if he saw it, the illusion of the moon actually being a horrified crimson eye. When Perinheri confirmed he had seen the illusion, the adults opened the door and embraced the soot-covered child, saying, "You have traversed the fire of two worlds within the hearth, and here you are reborn." Perinheri would later stay and presumably grow up in Khaenri'ah and become a leading figure amongst the kingdom's knights. Perinheri's best friend was Leobrant, a fellow knight, and their friendship would morph into an unfortunate rivalry. In Volume 2, we learn that the orphanage welcomed a newcomer, a beautiful woman named Angelica who claimed to be a noble princess. During the Archon War, her nation fell to a god named Deus Auri. She refused to submit to Deus Auri's new rule, and so she fled to Khaenri'ah. Recognize the name Deus Auri? You should, cause it's super familiar, trust me. If not, it's actually revealed in Nuvilet's voice line to be Rex Lapis, our beloved Geo Harabuji. Angelica declared that she would marry the strongest warrior in Khaenri'ah, and Perinheri's best friend Leobrant was smitten with her. So smitten, in fact, that he was driven to madness to the point where he'd cause trouble and randomly fight with the other knights. Perinheri was incredibly sus of Angelica and her bad influence on Leobrant, so he devised a plan. Perinheri was going to kill Angelica. This would cause Angelica and Leobrant to flee Khaenri'ah with Perinheri in pursuit. But once the three crossed Khaenri'ah's borders, Leobrant turned into a monster as a result of a curse. Leobrant was a descendant of those who forsook their god and came to Khaenri'ah. Here are the biggest takeaways from the story. Volume 1 reveals that Khaenri'ah was searching for Descenders. What are Descenders exactly? In the opening cutscene of Genshin, the unknown god refers to both Traveler and their sibling as Outlanders. Outlanders are beings who have come from outside of Teyvat. Aliens. Perinheri defines Descenders as beings who can transcend the gods. This definition is further expanded upon in the Natzittenkreuz questline by Fontaine researcher René de Petrichor. Descenders are Outlanders but with extra steps. René concludes that Descenders are beings that have wills that can rival an entire world. They have the power to create, protect, sustain, and destroy worlds. He makes a clear distinction between Outlanders and Descenders in that not all Outlanders are Descenders. So Outlanders and Descenders are both beings that come from outside of Teyvat. They're both alien, but the difference is Descenders have wills that can rival Teyvat and transcend the gods, but regular Outlanders don't. This is further supported by Naida's statement about Traveler and their sibling. Traveler is the fourth Descender to be identified, but their sibling is not a Descender, just a regular normie Outlander. And Genshin added something really sneaky in regards to our Traveler and sibling. Perinheri's pronoun changes in traditional Chinese depending on which twin you choose to be your starting character. If you choose Lumine, you get the female pronoun for Perinheri, and if you choose Aether, you get the male pronoun for Perinheri. I actually went to confirm this myself. On my main account, Aether is my Traveler, and for my EU server account, Lumine is my Traveler. The only problem is my EU account hasn't been touched in almost 2 years, and I haven't even finished the Mondstadt Archon quest on it to unlock the Sumeru Desert waypoint that takes you to Fontaine. So I did what I had to do. I traveled from Mondstadt to Chenyu Vale, then from Chenyu Vale to Fontaine in order to get to the Fontaine bookstore that sells Perinheri Volumes 1 and 2 to see the text change in traditional Chinese in order to confirm that this was in fact true. All in the name of lore. Does this mean I did all this to confirm that Perinheri is actually Traveler? I know what you're thinking. This just makes things even more confusing, and that's true, but it's also very interesting. Because we learn several things about Perinheri in the story. Perinheri is an Outlander since they successfully traversed the Fire of Two Worlds. But Perinheri doesn't seem to be a Descender, since Angelica states that Perinheri does not have the nobility to shoulder a world. And we just established in the Sumeru Archon quest that Traveler is a Descender, so how can Traveler be Perinheri? Perhaps not having the nobility to shoulder a world just means the Traveler isn't at their full potential yet. Perhaps they will unlock the will to rival all of Teyvat later. Just note that Perinheri's pronoun changes only in the traditional Chinese version of Genshin and not in any other language as far as I'm concerned. But we know for a fact Traveler's sibling ended up in Khaenri'ah. If this is confusing, it's okay. I'm sure details and speculations will be clarified with that next sweet, juicy Dainsleif Archon quest. But do you want to know something that was made way clearer with the release of Perinheri? The Hilichurl Curse of Genshin Impact. And I know, we're gonna cover the super deadly curse in a sec. But Minsleif, we already know that when you kill Hilichurls, you're essentially killing people, so what do you mean? The information in Perinheri helps us out a lot with the Genshin timeline, especially since it's a common belief that Hilichurls had come from Khaenri'ah exclusively. I don't care how many fanfics you've read, but if Perinheri is reliable, then this is the first time we have the clearest picture of how the curse works and for how long it's been around. In the story, Angelica explains that Leobrant is a descendant of those who forsook their god and came to the kingdom. This is why the kingdom's obstinately pure-blooded aristocracy persists. This is the price of betraying your own god. During the Archon War, there were people who refused to submit to the newly instated Archons. This resulted in Celestia putting a curse on humanity. The people who refused to live in Teyvat under the jurisdiction of Celestia's appointed Archons fled to Khaenri'ah, the nation without a god. If those people went to Khaenri'ah and tried to come back to Teyvat, they would turn into Hilichurls, them, and their descendants. The pure-blooded Khaenri'an curse operates differently than this celestial curse on Teyvatians, since pure-blooded Khaenri'ans don't turn into Hilichurls, but we'll cover that in a future video. This means that the celestial curse has been happening for thousands of years. The archive states that Hilichurls have existed for over 1,000 years, but their numbers experienced a dramatic increase 500 years ago. This paints a super dark and very sad picture. In the Khaenri'ah Archon quest, we know that Khaenri'ah was also home to immigrant Teyvadians. Perinheri confirms that those non-pure-blooded Khaenri'ans have already been cursed for refusing to submit to the gods, them and their descendants. So that increase in Hilichurls 500 years ago? Well, when the cataclysm happened and people started fleeing from Khaenri'ah into Teyvat for safety, they turned into monsters. Dang, just imagine you and your loved ones turning into monsters and all you're trying to do is run away. And yes, while that's poetic and sad, you know what's even sadder? The possibility that Khaenri'ans can't ever return home. Here's my theory. This would be the deadliest curse in Genshin if it ends up being true. Khaenri'ans can't even return to their destroyed homeland even if they wanted to, cause they'll die. In the Chasm Archon quest, Dainsleif tells us about Khaenri'ah's national flower, the Inteyvat. If you take this flower out of Khaenri'ah, the flower hardens. Only when you return it back to Khaenri'ah will the petals grow soft once more and finally turn to dust. At the end of the Khaenri'ah Archon quest, Dainsleif and Traveler unearth two bodies, male and female corpses, the latter being Khaenri'ah's mother. This male corpse was buried way after the other body and it was holding a silk scarf. A silk scarf Clother was holding on to when Khaenri'ah went missing. Dainsleif is shocked at the possibility that this body could be Clother Alberic's, meaning Clother figured out how to break the curse of immortality that was placed on pure-blooded Khaenri'ans. And I know how. He went back home to Khaenri'ah and died there, allegorically similar to an Inteyvat. After all, Khaenri'ah is very close to Sumeru. The Abyss Order has been trying to revive the nation of Khaenri'ah, but they can't because they'll die if they step foot in the land. This is probably why the Loom of Fate is so important. They need it to break this fatal curse. But then how did Clother's body get buried? It could have been a reborn Khaenri'ah. Clother did say that Khaenri'ah is now the Loom of Fate, free of the curse, and can write his fate anew. If he has a new body, he definitely could have brought his father's body back to Sumeru to bury it next to his mother's, since only the two of them would know the burial site. But Khaenri'ah had envoys and diplomats that could leave the country and come back. This is true because it was mentioned in the Enkanomiya World Quest and backed up in Perinheri. I'm guessing this fatal Khaenri'an curse was placed during the Cataclysm 500 years ago. Or hear me out. This is crazy, I know, but the Khaenri'an envoys might have been Outlanders. Descender rejects, cause I mean Khaenri'ah was literally farming for Descenders and Outlanders, but the curse being placed 500 years ago probably makes the most sense. Dainsleif mentioned wanting to return home at the end of his journey, but bro, we can't. It's that reoccurring theme of being unable to return home. Teyvadians can't return to Teyvat if they've abandoned their gods. They'll turn into Hilichurls. Khaenri'ans can't return home because they'll die if they step foot on Khaenri'an soil. And Traveler and their sibling can't return home. Perinheri was actually inspired by the Italian poem Orlando Innamorato. The story is about a paladin named Orlando who is trying to win the love of a beautiful princess from China named Angelica. This poem is actually incomplete since Italy was invaded by French troops headed by King Charles VII at the time of Boiardo's writing. The sequel, Orlando Furioso, was written by Ludovico Ariosto, and in it, Orlando goes on a rampage to find out that Angelica had fallen in love and eloped with a man named Medoro. Fun fact, Angelica and Medoro are actually in Fontaine. They're local legends who can be found in Salacia Plains. The fact that this love poem and its sequel were written by different authors is reflected in Perinheri's description. It was a Khaenri'an tale that took several generations and several authors to write. Speaking of Angelica, if she's supposed to be a princess from Liyue, then why is her name Angelica? The authors make a note of this stating, note that the ancient people of Liyue did not use such names. Now that I consider it, her name may have been Lady Miaoyan, Lady of Wondrous Sound, or Tianwang Nu, Servant of Tianwang. The name Tianwang was mentioned in Genshin's Developer Insight No. 4 in regards to Xiao's design inspiration. It describes the well-known Taoist Huaguang Tianwang, a guardian deity, and his name means Heavenly King of Radiant Light. Angelica being one who is as a divine emissary, the servant of a heavenly king, and later referring to herself as freedom, that which has broken free of fate, does sound suspicious. Now what I'm about to say next requires prior knowledge about Teyvat's earliest history regarding the primordial era. But my guess is that she could have been a woman from a part of the primordial civilization that was ruled by Faunis and the Four Shining Shades and settled into what is now Liyue. The primordial civilization was massive, and her nation may have worshipped primordial gods before the celestial archons came to take over. The name Perinheri is interesting as well, because when you Google it, the only thing that comes up are links to Genshin. According to the few sources I could find, Perin in Latin means beautiful angel, with Heri meaning yesterday. Although Perinheri might very crudely mean yesterday's beautiful angel, it could be today's hint towards Natlan. See what I did there? There's a line that stood out to me in the story. You have traversed the fire of two worlds within the hearth, and here you are reborn. Or resurrected. Either we're resurrecting the possibly dead Pyro Archon, La Senora, or perhaps something else. If you'd like more videos like this, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. I'm your Leafy Lord Minsleif, and I read the Genshin Impact lore so that you don't have to.